Hey there, welcome back. Today we're going to build up my TH475. So not going to spend a whole lot of time on the intro, just doing a few choice upgrades to this thing. Otherwise it's going to be mostly factory. We're going to install Sonex boost valve, pump body bushing, 4L80E, 34 element heavy duty intermediate sprag, and then we're going to rollerize the rear of the case, and of course dual feed the direct clutch internally. We also install some high energy clutches in the direct, and then either high energies or stock level in the intermediates and stock level frictions in the forward drum. Alright, I'm going to start with the gear train, so let me get set up and then we'll get into it. Alright, first things first, when you're going to rollerize the rear of the case, what you want to do is grab your 3-tab selective washer that came out of the case, and then the little 4-tab Babbitt style thrust washer that went on the back of the output shaft, and just simply see how thick they are together. Okay, so this looks like it's about 150 thousandths. And then grab your TH350 late model pump bearing along with 1 or 2 shims, and try to get close to that as a place to start. So this looks like it's about 162. I'm fine with that. And then we have an extra shim just in case we need it. Okay, now go ahead and start prepping all your parts. So lube up all your bushings. Okay, for this particular transmission, I had to do a lot of clearancing with the bushing for the front planet. That's not normal, or it's not usual, I should say. The sun gear shaft always requires bushing clearancing. Just a little bit of sandpaper. I start with 400 grit, then I'll work to 600, and then 800 or 1,000, just depending on how it goes. But it's rather unusual that I have to do it with the bushing in the front planet. But it sometimes happens. Alright, next, go ahead and lubricate all your bearings. And you can soak these in transmission fluid as well if you want. I just like to use the green assembly lube. So this is going to be your center support to sun gear thrust. So it's going to go like that, and then this portion here, this is the race that goes into the center support, and it's going to go in like this. So it'll be like this once it's fully assembled in the gear train. Okay, here's going to be your output shaft to rear ring gear thrust bearing. Okay, I mean, you could use the blue assembly lube too for this. I just inadvertently grabbed it, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, and it's going to go like this, onto the back of the rear ring gear, and then you're going to have your bearing, and then you're going to have the top portion of the bearing. And then this last bearing, the widest one, is going to be your sun gear to ring gear thrust bearing. And it seems like this is trying to tell me it already has plenty of lube. Okay, and it's going to go just like this, with the top portion of the race facing down. Okay, it's going to sit in there like that. Later, 4L80Es, when they made a change to the 97 and up, they cut little notches, and they installed a little, I think it's a 41 thousandths inch spacer or shim that goes underneath this bearing. So if you're working with like a later 4L80E that would otherwise come with that, I believe 99 and up, you want to make sure that that shim is there if you have all the other original gear train parts. Alright, let's begin building up the gear train. So first things first, I'm going to grab your ring gear and your intermediate shaft, and you see the end with the snap ring groove. It's going to go in just like this. Want to make sure the snap ring groove is exposed. And then just go ahead and carefully expand the snap ring just enough so that you can get it into the groove. You don't want it any wider than that. Okay, now I'll go ahead and install your output to ring gear thrust bearing. Put a little bit more assembly lube on it. Okay, it's going to go with the bottom race, aka the top hat, facing down just like this. Alright, turn it right side up. Put a little bit of lube at the base. And go ahead and install your rear sun gear to ring gear thrust bearing. And you want it just like that. Alright, now go ahead and grab your rear planet and turn it upside down on your bench. Any bench with a nice big hole in it will work. I'm just using a foot press. And then grab your ring gear / intermediate shaft and then carefully lower it in upside down until you mesh the ring gear and the planetary carrier. Okay, leave it just like that. Then put a little assembly lube. Grab your output shaft. Lube up your bushing. Just double check, make sure that that bushing is not fully fully seated into the bore so that it obstructs that lube hole. And then just carefully lower it into place. Okay, this was tough coming out, so if you have a situation where it won't go in just, by pressing on it, just use a soft hammer and, seat it. Okay, your snap ring is next. Okay, these are very tough, so just want to be careful with it. And like I said, if you break them, no big deal. They're pretty much everywhere at hard part suppliers. Alright, so good to go. Alright, I have not yet replaced that little output shaft seal, so I'm going to do that now. Or a little O-ring here. Okay, when you replace these O-rings, it's a good idea to lube up the splines. Get them nice and covered up so that the new O-ring will slide right on without, you risk breaking your new O-ring. So it goes right on, right in the groove, no issues. Okay, just double check, make sure the snap ring's fully seated, and then go ahead and turn everything right side up. And then just kind of spin the intermediate shaft, make sure that it's not binding or, getting caught up somewhere. Should spin nice and easy. Alright, next is going to be your silencer ring or your oil slinger. Whatever this thing is called, you can situate it right there. Some models have these, some don't. If yours doesn't, don't worry about it. Alright, now go ahead and saturate your intermediate shaft with assembly lube. This is in preparation for the installation of the sun gear shaft and sun gear assembly once we have the front planet in place. Alright, now go ahead and install your 4-tab washer onto the rear planet, this location here. What I will typically do is take the Babbitt washer that normally goes on the back of the output shaft, and I'll transplant that into this location. Now, when we go to check the play between the reaction and output carriers, if there's too much slop, then I will stick a shim underneath of this thing to clean that up and tighten it up so that that play isn't exorbitant. All right, so we have our oil slinger in place and we have our thrust washer. So now go ahead and carefully drop your reaction carrier onto the output carrier and let them mesh. And that should be that for that. Now go ahead and grab your sun gear shaft and sun gear. Okay, again, lube up the entire body of the sun gear shaft along with the bushings. And you can lube up the splines as well for the sun gear. And then what you're going to want to do is mesh these two so that this hole and this hole are aligned perfectly. Okay, and these splines here, you notice they're beveled toward the top of the sun gear, on the face. These face down. All right, let's check it with a flashlight. That flashlight's not working. Let me go get one that is. All right. Okay, now this is the point where you want to be kind of careful, especially if you had to do a lot of clearancing with these bushings. You don't want these sun gear and sun gear shaft coming out of mesh. So just carefully lower it onto the intermediate shaft and grabbing hold of the sun gear to the extent you can and follow it all the way down. Okay, and then you can turn it. Basically what you're looking for is any kind of signs of binding up with the bushings. Assuming you don't have any, which I don't, then it's fine, you're good to go. Alright, so in this box we have a new low roller clutch assembly. Always replace your one-way clutches in all these transmissions. So I'm curious to see if any rollers have popped out. Yes, they have. And of course we have a little tag interfering with us as well. So this is kind of the deal with these things. I mean, just because the rollers pop out does not mean that the assembly is bad, okay? It's unfortunately perfectly normal for that to happen. So it's going to go in with this side facing up and the cam side facing down. You may have to gently squeeze inward just a little bit to get it to seat. And once it's there, it's good. Now, you can take your center support, which we haven't assembled yet, but you can take your center support and just test it. Okay. Let's put the thrust washer on there. And we'll put our bearing in place. So when you go to install the center support for the final time, your top brace is going to go like that. Now you can stick your rest of your assembly in there. And then when you drop this in, you're going to rotate it counterclockwise. Okay, should spin freely counterclockwise and lock clockwise. So here I'm rotating the entire assembly. You hear that squealing sound? That's a sign of a very healthy low roller clutch. Okay, I'm going to take this off. I'm going to reposition the camera so that we can build up the center support, and then we'll put that back on here, and then we'll take this entire gear train, chuck it up in a vise, and I will test for play between the reaction and the output carrier, and if we need to, we'll shim it. Okay, first things first, go ahead and lube up your sealing surface. Okay, if you're working with a pre-69 or early 69 TH400, you're going to have the first design center support installed. It has real thick lugs, and there's no any kind of like vent hole, you know, for the intermediate piston. So if you have that situation and that's the unit you're working on, or that vintage, you want to swap in a center support like this and use what's called an anti-fretting ring. You'll see that a little bit when we go to put the case together, and you're going to want to substitute those in place of the pre-existing center support. Reason for that is those early center supports tended to wear out the case, and as a result, you know, if it got real bad, you would have to replace the case. Okay. All right, for your lip seals, if you're new to the TH400 or really any transmission, and you know there's a whole bunch of lip seals that are all roughly similar or exactly the same size, where the difference between them is very, very minimal, it's good practice just to keep the lip seals installed until you're ready to actually replace them with the new ones. Okay. So what you want to do in the case of lip seals that go inside of, you know, in the inner diameter of a piston, is look for the lip seal where the lip is on the inboard side. Okay. And then you have your seating surface on the outboard side, and that'll help you distinguish between, say, the center lip seal for the intermediate piston and the lip seal that goes in the drums, either the forward or the direct. Okay, so just go ahead and seat it all the way around. Just work it in. Okay, make sure it is fully seated in that groove. The lip is going to face the direction of apply, so fluid's going to come up in there like that. It'll force the seal against the sealing surface on the inner bore of the center support, and it'll seal off that apply circuit for you. Okay, now your outer lip seal, and you'll notice the difference. You have the sealing surface outboard and the seating surface inboard. And there's a little bit of residual transmission fluid in this piston. That's no big deal. Okay. Okay, make sure that that lip seal is installed fully all the way around. It's not kinked. You know, it's not partially protruding or anything like that. Alright, so this is going to be common sense, but I'll mention it just for the sake of being completely thorough. You want to make sure that your little bumps here are aligned with the cutouts in the center support. Again, I mean, that is pure Captain Obvious stuff, but you never know. Okay, just sit it there on top, just like that, and then start working it in. I start with the inner surface first. Get that lip seal collapsed and onto the journal, and then I begin working the outer perimeter. Just apply like some gentle downward pressure on it, and keep pressure on it. Okay, this process is going to be exactly the same for your aluminum pistons. Okay, between the two types, the aluminum pistons I find to be a little bit more desirable, but the stamped steel ones, are also fine. It's really these plastic spring retainers that are a little sketchy, especially if the transmission overheated in its previous lifespan, and that little retainer gets real hard and brittle. That's when you want to replace with an aluminum piston. Okay, just kind of rock it back and forth just to make sure you're fully in the groove. and then go ahead and install your return spring assembly. Alright, so you want to set it up like this. And it does not matter, you know, which one of these holes you go with, either, you know, this set or this set. You just want to be consistent. So here we're going to start with the left side hole. You just come around and do the same thing. That's basically it. So then you got your cover plate and your snap ring. Okay, I'm gonna actually take my gloves off to do this because they tend to want to snatch the glove, and you know, a piece of the glove will break off, and then, you know, I'll look stupid. I'll have to clean it up. I want to avoid all that if at all possible. Just go all the way around. Compress it into the groove. Didn't need the screwdriver. Okay. Alright, now that your center support's assembled, we'll talk about dual feeding the direct clutch. Now you can use whatever type of sealing rings you want here on the stator. I prefer the Teflon one-piece kind that go on the 480E, but like I said, you can use whatever. If you don't have a resizing tool, you can use a hose clamp. You just want to be careful that the hose clamp doesn't cut the sealing ring. So like what I would recommend is you put like something in between the hose clamp and the sealing ring to compress it so that you avoid cutting it. Alright, so you have 4 sealing ring grooves, but you're only going to install 3 sealing rings. Okay, those are the sealing rings you're going to install if you want to internally dual feed the direct clutch. So you're going to set up your center support just like this, and then on the direct clutch, okay, see this seal here, this sealing or lip seal, you're going to leave that out, and then you're going to place a 3/8 of an inch cup plug in the high reverse feed port on the case. And that corresponds to this feed port right here in the center support. This is going to be your high reverse feed. Now, if you're running a trans brake with a reverse pattern, you're actually going to plug the direct clutch feed port and have everything flow through the high reverse feed. And that's true of TH400s and all years of 480E. Okay, all years TH400, all years 480E. That's really it as far as dual feeding. And you want to, all other things equal, drill out your 2-3 feed a little bit more than you otherwise would if you weren't dual feeding, because the additional volume underneath this direct clutch piston that's going to pool in this area is going to act as like an additional accumulator. So you want to offset that with a larger orifice. That's basically the extent of dual feeding. You combine that with other mods and other parts that you want to install depending on your application or what you're trying to achieve. You'll have a really nice setup that will handle pretty much anything that you're prepared to throw at it. Okay, unfortunately the camera just kind of freaked out on me. It glitched. I lost the sealing ring footage. But to make a long story short, going to be using Kentmore J38736-7. If you don't have this tool, it's not the end of the world. Any sealing rings that are readily available for the TH400 480E will work here. You can use the iron rings. You can use the kind of plastic or composite rings that kind of snap together. Whatever works. It's really preference. So some builders will tell you that the Teflon sealing rings, both on here as well as on the pump, are preferred for anything real high performance, real heavy duty, especially if you're running a higher pressure spring in the pump. But for almost any other application, including this one, I'm just going to put this in a early 70s square body truck. It's not going to be raised, it's not going to be hot rodded around. Any sealing ring type will work. Okay, that's the center support. I just carefully installed all of the rings so that they weren't overstretched with a 45-degree angle pick. I mean, it's pretty pretty basic deal. All right, we're going to leave this on the bench for now because I want to build up the direct drum and make sure that that functions, make sure that it applies before we go and install the center support on the rest of the gear train. All right, first things first, going to install the intermediate sprag. And again, you can use a spiral lock ring here if you're going to be doing anything high RPM. Just a 480E late model spiral lock snap ring is going to be your best bet. But for what I'm doing, it's not necessary. So most TH400s after, I believe, March or April of 1971 had a cam style inner race, and they took a roller clutch style one-way deal for the intermediate, and there was like 8 rollers. If you're doing anything real high performance, real heavy duty, you do not want to use that drum. You're gonna have to swap to a drum either like this, an earlier drum, or you're going to have to source and install a 480E direct drum from a 97 and up transmission. Early 480E drums, I believe they also used a roller style or something that isn't nearly as favorable, and you want the you really want the 34 element heavy duty intermediate sprag for anything that's going to be raced or that's going to see a lot of RPM, especially if shifts are being set up to be aggressive. Okay, so for your 1-2 shift, you want to manage that. You want to make sure that you keep the accumulator active. I mean, most of your applications, in fact, I would say 90 to 90, I don't know, I want to just make up numbers at this point. Like, I'd say 95% of all applications, maybe even 99%, you do not need to modify the 1-2 accumulator circuit itself in these transmissions. Okay, with the sprags, they're always going to fight you on the way in if they're brand new, so just do the best you can to collapse the rollers. I'm not sure if I have this installed correctly or not, but when it is installed correctly, it's going to freewheel clockwise and then lock counterclockwise. So we'll find out. So if you need to, just kind of run a pick along the rollers to get them to collapse so that you can get this thing onto the inner race. And because I'm filming, and I can actually tell, I think this is on backwards, it's going to fight me. Just going to flip it around. And, when you take it out of the package, you might be able to tell the way, which side is correct based on just the way the rollers are orientated. I never pay attention to that. It makes too much sense to do so. Okay. All right. Now get your top cover, collapse it in all the way, and then just line up your, little retention tabs with their corresponding little cutouts and install your snap ring. Hey, pull up on it like that just to make sure it's 100% seated. Once you're satisfied that it is, then you're done with it. Okay, pull off your inner lip seal if you haven't already. And then go ahead and lube up your bore. Real high RPM, real high performance racing. You're going to want to drill something like a 50 to 60 thousandths of an inch bleed hole in this area, generally speaking, opposite of the other bleed hole, so that you can vent additional fluid that would otherwise pool under this piston at high RPMs in first and second gear. you want to make sure that, regardless of your application, that the drum you're using has a bleed ball, especially if the piston doesn't and your steel pistons will not. So you want to make sure that that bleed ball is there and that it's working. So you can shake it. Okay. If you're not sure that it's working or it's not moving, just kind of work it a little bit with a pick. Okay, I can see that this is moving. Get a little bit closer. Okay, you can see it moving in there. If you don't see it moving, it's going to be a problem, and you're either going to have to fix it, get it moving, or you're going to need to replace your drum. Okay, here's your direct piston. Alright, a lot of folks do not like these stamped steel style pistons, and for high performance it is recommended you swap to, like, at very least a factory aluminum piston. But if you're going to have to swap this piston because you think the piston's the weak link, then I would just recommend going with a billet piston and be done with it. Okay, so inboard seal. Okay, and then your outboard seal. And if you feel like you need to replace the piston, there's a good chance you probably need to replace the drum itself. The billet aluminum drums that they make for TH400s and 4L80Es are usually provisioned to take a 36 element super heavy duty intermediate sprag assembly. So you kind of have all your bases covered. Now, the aluminum drums are not as durable, so to speak, as the factory steel drums. When it comes to, especially if you're doing a lot of manual second, engine braking, whatnot. So if you're at that level, then chances are the transmission, the entire transmission itself, has become more of a maintenance item as opposed to being something you only have to overhaul once in a blue moon. So, you're playing in that space. It's like a whole different model as far as, like, maintenance, sustainment, risk reduction versus a factory application or, most mild to moderate performance type situations. Alright, that's in there. Okay, return springs. So if you watch the teardown video, you'll recall that in the direct clutch for this transmission, at the 6 and the 12 o'clock position, there were no springs. So I'm just going to put all these springs back in exactly as they were. And when in doubt, just do that and you'll be fine. I don't think these things are, direction specific, but I could be wrong, because some of the ones that are leaning like this, when I flip them around, they're not leaning anymore. For LEDs, they use the captured style. The older TH400s, there's spring seats, built into the piston. Alright, we'll go over the foot press and I'll press this in, install the snap ring. Okay, when you set up your drum or whatever it is you're working with in the press and you have your return spring assembly all positioned, you want to make sure that you have 2 locking bosses just like this here at the 6 o'clock position. And the reason why you want to do that is so that your snap ring is going to be pretty much guaranteed to be engaged on all 4 locking tabs or retaining tabs. All right. Otherwise, you only have 3 out of the 4, and there's a slight possibility that they can come out, or the snap ring might pop out under real high RPM or heavy acceleration. I mean, I've seen plenty of transmissions and drums and whatnot where only 3 out of 4 were engaged and it didn't pop out, but this is just general best practice for when you're working with these things. So I'm going to see if I can do this with the camera and tripod in the way, and if not, I'll have to move it and do it off camera. All right, there it goes. All right, let's go back to the bench. All right, so first things first, we want to install our apply ring. Now, the nice thing about these stamped steel pistons is that you can mix and match apply rings to get the clearance you want and the number of frictions in there that you would like to have. So, and this applies to both the forward and the direct drums. So this one's going to be 0. There's a 0, a 1, and a 4 for these stamped steel pistons. 0 will permit 6 frictions and 6 steels, no cushion plate. Number 1 will permit 5, and the number 4, I believe, will permit, well, 4. All right, let's go ahead and stick it in there. They could be a little tricky to get into because, they're under a lot of spring tension. So just use your screwdriver. I'm not sure that there's a specific orientation that you have to manage to. There's some cutouts. I don't know if I can get this on camera, but you see a cutout. See right there. I'll have to check the footage when I'm done this segment. If it's not correct, I'll come back and I'll let you know. Okay, 6 frictions, 6 steels, 80 thousandths on the frictions. And this is our bottom steel. So just like that. Okay, and then I don't think this matters, but you have your 2 tabs like so. Again, for orientation. If you want, you can stick them all aligned up and, the same 2 lugs. For those that are OCD, I'll go ahead and do that. Clearance for this drum needs to be in the neighborhood of 50 to 70 thousandths of an inch, somewhere in there. Okay, you don't want it too tight because then of course you'll drag in first and second gear, and obviously you don't want it too loose because you'll start slipping under heavy load. Okay, so these are coming up just beyond the ledge here. Just beyond the ledge. The factory frictions will come right up to the ledge. So if I'm too tight here, I'm going to swap out one of these waffle style frictions with a factory friction. If you're below, right now I'm above, but if you're below, you're going to need to take your dial caliper or micrometer or something along those lines, like a depth micrometer would be best. And you're going to need to measure the distance between the top of this little ledge here, okay, where the apply plate sits, or the backing plate, and between that and the top of the friction. And then you need to add that to the overall travel that this plate takes or makes between its rest position and when it's fully seated against a snap ring. So this is sitting on top, which is generally not good. That means I'm too tight. So let me actually go ahead and get a couple of factory frictions and swap a couple of these waffle style frictions out, and then we'll go from there. All right, let's see what kind of difference this makes. And looks like I'm right at the ledge. And it's still a little tight, a little bit tight, because this is going to give me about maybe 40 thousandths of clearance. I'm going to remove a third waffle friction. Again, this is not like super critical, If I can't put waffle frictions in this clutch pack, it's not the end of the world. It's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes when it comes to building these things up. Yeah, I still don't like that. Now, if you're in this situation and you're running an aluminum piston, you can machine the piston a little bit. You can also machine your backing plate, so you'll just need to kind of calculate where you are and where you need to be, and then have your machinist take off whatever needs to be taken off. Okay, so these are 78 thousandths, so that's kind of why we're in the predicament we're in. So 4 times 6 is 24 thousandths, so we're probably 24 thou tight relative to factory spec. And I don't know, I've never tried to machine or have machined those apply rings, so I don't know how much of an idea or a solution that would be. I think I'm going to end up having to leave these waffle frictions out entirely. I got one more in there. Let me see if that is sufficient enough to get me slightly below that bevel when all these clutches are in there. I want to be about maybe, like I said, 25 thousandths below the bevel, 15 thousandths at least, and then I think I'll be within my, my target clearance range if I can at least get that much distance between top of the clutch and that bevel. It's still dragging. Okay, I'm gonna have to redo this entire clutch pack. I got 5 of the 6 frictions out. I'm gonna have to grab another friction real quick, and then we'll swap it out. Kind of disappointing, but not all that surprising. I mean, for what I'm doing, the high energies of the waffle style plates are really overkill. Now, if you're using harder frictions like this, okay, that don't absorb as much fluid, all other things equal, your shifts are going to be a little firmer. So that's also something to keep in mind when building one of these transmissions. I'm still a little tight. tight, probably by about 20 thousandths. Okay, I'm going to use a 76 thousandths steel for a 480E forward drum. Okay, this is a good example of why you always want to have like extra parts, especially when it comes to setting up clutch packs and some of these older transmissions. You never know what you're going to run into. Okay, so here we have a thinner 76 thou steel, so that should give us what we need as far as desired clearance. And there could be something that I'm just simply not aware of that's driving this too. I don't think I might actually have to put a second one in here. All right, we got a second 76 thou forward clutch flat steel 480E. Alright, I think this should work. It is just below the lip. Let's see where we are at. Okay, we're 15 thou, looks like. Yeah, about 15 thousandths. I mean, I may need to install a third if the clearance is less than 50. But it's sitting on top of the ledge, which is what you want. You don't want it sitting, you don't want the apply plate or the backing plate, whatever you want to call it. You don't want it sitting directly on top of the friction. Okay, these should move nice and free, okay, without any kind of, binding up or, any kind of drag. So you see that, see how nice and free that top friction moves? That's what you want. Alright, this is everything that originally was going to go in there, but couldn't because it wouldn't fit. So, again, this is, what you sometimes run into. If this was high performance, I would just simply get a either a specialized backing plate that's a little bit thinner but otherwise heavy duty and strong, or I would just machine this one, because you can machine these too. It's not the end of the world. You're not going to weaken them, at least not substantially, as long as you don't take too much off. Something like 20 or 30 thousandths would be fine. Okay, now what we're going to do is air check, make sure everything is good, and then I'll set up the dial indicator and we'll measure for clearance and make any final adjustments before we consider this done. Alright, now we're going to do some quick air checks. Just carefully slide your direct drum over your center port. Make sure it's fully seated. And then when you're dual feeding, you want to make sure that you just put a finger. It doesn't matter which one of these holes you use for the air, but you want to put a finger on the other one. Okay, that's a nice robust apply. Okay. Alright, so we know we have 15 thousandths that we need to add to whatever travel number that we're going to get when we set up the dial indicator. So let me do that and then we'll bring you back to measure the clearance. So 50 to 60 thousandths is what I'm personally shooting for. The general rule of thumb with frictions of this size and drums of this diameter is 10 thou per friction of clearance. So this drum has 6 clutches, so 60 thou is kind of the target that you're shooting for. If you have 70 thousandths, it's not the end of the world. If you have 50, it should be okay. If you had to choose which side of that line you wanted to be on, I actually want to be a little bit on the higher side, not the lower, because I don't want drag when I'm driving through first and second gear. Okay, so that's coming in at 35 thousandths. There's a little bit better view of the indicator. Okay, so 35 thousandths worth of travel plus our 15 thou from the ledge to the top of the friction, or I should say the ledge to the surface of the top friction, gives us 50. I'm good with that. Like I said, this is going to be a low RPM application. It's just going to be mostly daily driving with, you know, a little bit of trail use in the backcountry, you know, nothing crazy. So, you know, if I decide I want to open it up a little bit, I can add an additional forward clutch friction, and that will give me, you know, 65 thousandths clearance. So either one of those figures is fine. All things equal, the more clearance you have, assuming it's still within the specified ranges, the firmer the shift is going to be, again, all other things equal. So something to keep in mind as well. I have a little bolt here because, you know, whatever you do not want to accidentally put air in that intermediate feed without the whole clutch pack, you know, set up and installed inside the case. Otherwise, you run the risk of tearing your lip seals. So I've literally waffled back and forth between a couple different clutch stack-ups for the direct drum. Thought about it a little bit and realized I did want to put the waffle frictions in there, so I dug in the drawer and came up with 5 choline steel plates of, I think these are 76 thousandths. Let me confirm that. Actually, they're 86 thousandths. Okay, 86, 87 thousandths. So we're gonna put this stack up in the drum and see how that turns out. So steel friction, steel friction, steel friction. And then I have to use a plain steel at the top because I ran out of cholines. Whenever you're stacking up a clutch pack where there's either different thicknesses of steels, or the steels are of different treatments, like we have a plain steel and then we have the rest are heat treated, or, you know, they're choline coated. You always want to stick your either thinnest or less treated steels at the top of the clutch pack. So if I had, like, you know, let's just say I had 95 thousandths thick steels in here, and then I had like some 75 thousandths thick steels, you always want to put the 95 thou steels toward the bottom, or closest to the applied piston, and then keep your thinner steels up at the top. Okay. So let's go ahead and see where we're at in terms of you know, distance from the ledge to the top of the friction. So I'm going to reposition the camera so you can kind of see it in real time. Okay, we're going to start with the dial indicator open a little bit, and then just simply let the plunger collapse until it stops moving. It looks like it's about 23 thou. Try it again. Yeah, 23, 24 thousandths. So we know we have about 35 thousandths of travel with respect to the plate from the ledge to where it seats fully against this snap ring. So that would put us right in the neighborhood of 57, 58 thousandths, depending on, you know, exactly how much travel I have, and and all that good stuff. But I mean, as you can see, the top friction's moving nice and easy, no drag, no nothing. We're gonna go with this clutch pack, and we're gonna put the rest of these back in the drawer. All right, let's go ahead and put together the forward drum. So same deal as with the direct drum. You know, all of these lip seals, they're all the same size for the inner, the outer, and the drum itself. So it doesn't really matter which goes where. Main thing is just to get them seated fully so that you know they're good to go once you put them in. Okay, with the forward drum, it's up to you if you want to keep the seal in and or leave it out. If you leave it out, you'll have a much more robust engagement into forward. This seal was specifically installed into that location in the forward drum by GM to kind of soften the apply or engagement from park, reverse, neutral into drive. So I want to see if I can do all this on the bench without having a drum tip over. So same exact process as with the direct drum. You're just going to lube everything up as much as you can. Okay, for your apply ring, again the same situation. You have different apply rings, and they will be of different heights. This one's a number 1, so 5 frictions, 5 steels, and they are completely interchangeable. You can mix and match them, you know, whatever you're trying to do with your transmission, whatever application and use case. All things equal, the more frictions you have, the stronger the transmission will be. So I'm going to just leave that seal out. I'm not going to bother putting it in. Alright, there it goes. Alright, so as far as seating the, or compressing the spring assembly and putting the snap ring in, it's going to be the same as the direct drum. You just put your opening right here at the 6 o'clock position, and then compress everything, make sure the snap ring's fully engaged, all 4 locking tabs, and yeah, that's basically it. Just make sure it's fully seated in its groove. So let me go ahead and do that on the foot press, and then I'll bring you back and we'll finish up the forward drum build. Okay, 5 frictions, 5 steels, no wavy cushion plate. For the bottom steel. There we go. Okay, install your clutch pack without the hub first so that you can at least measure your clearance and see where you're at. It's a lot easier to do with the hub not in there, and then once you're set, you can go ahead and, you know, install your clutch hub. Now you can run a billet rollerized clutch hub for anything that's real high performance or heavy duty. I mean, I always encourage it whenever you have that kind of application, but if you're not going to do that, it's not the end of the world. No big deal. For most of these TH400s, you know, 475s, I mean, they're pretty bulletproof as they are, so you're not missing out if you don't want to spend the money in most cases. Now, if you're doing something real radical, then yeah, you're going to want to put a billet forward hub in there. Alright, now I'm going to see what kind of distance we have between the ledge and the top of the friction. So I'm just going to start with the dial caliper open and then let it collapse and see where it ends up. Okay, this is telling me about 35 thousandths. So we may actually have to transfer a thicker steel into here if we have too much clearance. For now, I'm going to put the backing plate slash direct clutch hub on, and then once the pump's assembled, we'll go ahead and we'll measure our clearance and do our air check, you know, all that good stuff. Alright, let's go ahead and deal with the pump. Alright, so we have the pump body. Okay, there's not really a whole lot you need to worry about with respect to the pump body. The main thing is make sure that this entire working surface is perfectly flush and true and straight. And you want to make sure that your clearance between the top of each gear, the drive and the driven gear, and the deck surface is where it needs to be. So to do that, you just carefully install your two gears. And then grab a straight edge. And then just stick your straight edge right along the top there, and then I'll use a 1.5 thou feeler gauge. The clearance is to be between 7/10,000ths and 1.5 thou. So all you're going to do is just try to slip the feeler gauge underneath the straight edge. And if you can do that without moving the straight edge, you know you have clearance issues. Alright, so I can't stick that feeler gauge underneath at all. So what I'm now going to do is just rotate the gears and make sure that they spin freely without moving the straight edge. Okay, as long as you can do that, you're good. So you want to check at multiple different spots, multiple different points. Okay, right in the middle, the gauge is going in about part way, and then it's coming to a stop. I mean, I could get it under, but I'd have to start moving the gauge. You're moving the straight edge rather. Okay, in truth, I tested this, you know, long before we got to point of assembly, but just wanted to show that real quick so that you can see what that process looks like. You'll want to do what I just did, and you want to rotate it and then kind of go in the opposite direction and repeat until you're satisfied that you have you know, proper clearance. It's not too far out and everything rotates underneath that straight edge without moving the straight edge itself. Alright, as far as working surface, just check it over, make sure it's good, make sure that this crescent on either end is not worn. In high performance applications, if the crescent is real worn, then you do run the risk of having volume and consequently line pressure issues at wide open throttle, especially under engines that will be producing a lot of power. And you'll have slight slippage, especially from the 2 to 3, if in fact that's the issue. You can drill out this drain back hole. It's usually not a big deal with TH400s. I'm not going to do it. This is just like I said, I'm mostly going to be stock application. In my C-Series square body truck that I'm going to acquire and build, I'm probably going to do an LS, but I'm not going to be doing anything crazy. I may just do like an LS1 and build it for like maybe 400 horsepower and that's it. For the most part, I just want it to be a nice, reliable truck. You know, and I'll probably carb it so that there's no electronic control. If I do an old school Chevy, you know, small block 350 or maybe 383, you know, same deal. You know, all 100% mechanical, you know, powertrain, no electronics, no computer or anything like that. All right, let me put the seal in and then, you know, we'll finish up with the rest of the pump. Lube everything up to the extent you can. Try to get some lube in here behind the crescent. So as mentioned earlier, I did splurge a little bit for a Sonex pump body bushing. It's Teflon coated as opposed to the factory bushings, which are not. Alright, so for your drive gear, there are dots to indicate the orientation. So if they're not, you know, if they're not there, then you always want to look and see where the offset is. Okay, so you always want the offset to the rear of the pump body, which means when you're assembling it like this, the offset faces you. Okay, so faces up, faces you, and it's biased to the rear of the assembly because, you know, that's what we're looking at here. This is the back half of the pump body. All right. I'm going to leave off the pump O-ring for now, and then we'll bring over the pump cover stators. So we have 2 bushings we need to install, so we'll go ahead and we'll install those. And then we have our valving. So we're going to use the Sonex O-ring LB400 or Line Boost 400 along with the stock spring. The Sonex spring gives you another 10% linear line pressure rise over stock. Again, it's really not anything you need unless you're doing high performance, then go ahead and install it. But other than that, if you want to give yourself a little bit of a boost, you can take an additional horseshoe shim and install it where it normally would go, just right on top of the one that's already in there, and that will give you about another maybe 5 to 7% PSI increase, and that should satisfy most any kind of stock or mild performance building needs. So let me go ahead and install these bushings. We'll test them on the forward drum, then we'll put the valves in, get all that done, and then we'll put the 2 halves together and be done with the with the pump assembly. Okay, for the back of the stator, we're going to use special bushing. This is a Kentmore tool. It is going to be J21465-2. This is part of a larger bushing kit specifically designed for the TH400, and it's designed to install all these bushings to the exact depth they need to be installed. Okay, for the front bushing, we're going to use a different driver. And it's going to be Kenmore J21465-3. Alright, go ahead and test fit your stator pump cover onto the forward drum. And make sure it slides right on over it and spins nice and smooth. Okay, that's what you want to see. Okay, one thing I'll point out with these TH475s is the heat-treated stator. So unlike most of the TH400s, these 475s come with heat treat here on the stator splines, as well as on the inner portion of the stator bore. So you see heat treatment down here at the base. So pretty cool. Alright, so here's your boost valve. This is from Sonics. So I always replace the factory boost valve just because it's, you know, old. God knows how many drive cycles are on it. And you don't want to be putting an old worn out boost assembly back into your, you know, otherwise freshly rebuilt TH400. So just install your O-rings. You want to be careful. You obviously don't want to break them. And as far as installation, okay, you're gonna have your horseshoe and then your spring seat. And like I said, you can substitute or swap in an additional horseshoe if you want a little bit more line pressure than the factory gives you with this spring that it comes with it. Alright, I'm gonna go and take you over to the vise because installing this on the bench is going to be extremely difficult to, you know, hold it, and, you know, at least for me, maybe, you know, some of you guys can do it without any issue, but for me it's kind of difficult, especially with a camera. I mean, it's almost guaranteed that I'll screw it up. So let me go ahead and do that, and then you know, we'll resume. I can first install the plug that goes in the rear because you want to actually get that done first, and then on the outside, you see the you know, little wear patterns. You know, that's the side that faces the roll pin. Which I think it goes this way. Okay, there's not going to be any real tension on this roll pin until you install the spring. So just kind of tap it against it so that the roll pin doesn't come out. Just like that. Alright, start with putting as much assembly lube as you can into this bore where the boost valve is going to go. Okay, go in from both ends. Get it nice and lubed up. And then we'll use some WD on everything else. And then you'll put a whole boatload of assembly lube on these O-rings. I mean, literally just lather it up. You can't really use too much. You can only use not enough. Alright, so again, here's your order of everything. You're going to have your pressure regulator spring, your spring seat, your horseshoe, and then the valve itself. Okay, just let everything kind of feed into the hole. And then what I'll do is I'll just press on the spring a little bit just to make sure the valve is 100% seated. Alright, when you go in with this thing, I decided to add some green assembly lube. You may have to use a hammer to kind of just get it started. These Sonex boost valves are notoriously machined super tight. I didn't have to do that, but you know, sometimes you need to. And it's going to take a lot of force, a lot of strength to get this thing fully seated. I mean, that's just normal. That's just the way it is. And like I said, you know, you really want to be careful with the machined edge here. I mean, even if it's not machined, it'll still be very sharp. So you're going to need to go at it, you know, barehanded. Otherwise, and ask me how I know this, you're going to get gloves caught up in that snap ring, or, you know, somehow snagged, and a piece of the glove will tear off. All right, let's go back to the bench. All right, now we're going to go ahead and assemble the two halves. Okay, I'll orient the wide, you know, the area where there's widest between the two bolt holes at the 6 o'clock are facing me. Lube up your entire working surfaces. And then just go ahead and gently drop the cover stator onto the body. Alright. I should have done this prior, but that would have made too much sense. Get your alignment tool ready to go. I'm batting 1,000 with this one. Okay, pump bowl locations. Your long bolt is going to go right here next to the boost valve. Your 2 intermediate length bolts, okay, they're going to go in these 2 locations right here. And then your 2 short bolts, they're going to go right here. Okay, if you don't have like a purpose-built alignment tool, you can use a large hose clamp. I mean, that's perfectly fine. Whatever works, but you need something to make sure that the pump's fully aligned. ½ inch. And then these get between 15 and 20 foot-pounds. So I'll just split it right down the middle, and we'll do like 17 and a half. Okay, start wherever, it doesn't matter. And go every other bolt until they're all torqued. And then just check them. Alright, if you have a checking tool, which you should have, you know, where your torque converter, which I don't have at the moment, you want to check your movement of the gears. Make sure they're not bound up. Okay, that feels perfect. Okay, I'm going to take off, I should say, this tool, and then we'll install the sealing rings. Okay, this selective spacer I'm not going to use. I'm actually going to need one that's a little bit thicker. And that's because we had the pump cover machined. So whenever you machine the cover and/or cover and body, you're shrinking the height of the pump relative to where it's going to sit in relation to the forward drum. So what you'll need to do is, if you do that, however much you take off, it's usually 20 thousandths if you machine both halves. You're going to need to look for something 20 thousandths thicker in terms of selective spacer. So I have a whole drawer full of them, all different thicknesses. Like I said, if you're building one of these for the first time, that's another example of a kind of a part that you want to have. Anything selective, whether it be pump washers or spacers, whatever whatever transmission you're working on, snap rings for clutches or for other things. If it's a selective part, you want to have some extras, on either side of whatever part, dimensions that came out of the transmission initially, because you never know if you're going to need it going back in with it. So it's just good practice to have those. Okay, we're going to use the same Kent Moore tool, J38736-7, to get these sealing rings sized. Okay, because all they are 4L80E center support, one piece Teflon sealing rings. Let's check it over, make sure it's okay. Alright, pump is essentially done other than the pump O-ring. I don't put that on until I'm ready to actually drop it back in the case for the final time. A whole bunch of stuff has to happen before then, so you're going to go ahead and grab your low reverse piston and accumulator, you know, that all that good stuff. Okay, so in terms of order, you have your piston, and of course you put your O-ring on it, or square cut ring, and then you're going to have a little washer in here. It's going to go in like this, and then you're going to have your pin. So these pins vary in length. In most cases you're not going to have to swap your pin out. You can check the depth, and I'll show you how to do that once we get to that point in the case. But you're going to put your spring seat in like this, and then you're going to track down your return spring, put that on, and you're going to sit all of it in there just like this. And turn everything up on the bench. Get ready for your E-clip. And this will fight you if you're not quick enough. And it's not in all the way, so there we go. A little sloppy, but it's in there. Okay, for your 1-2 accumulator piston, you're going to have Teflon seals. New sealing rings come in the kit. You want to make sure that you replace these old ones because they are more than likely very worn out. Hey, you don't need any special sizing tools for these. You just kind of carefully work them into position in the groove. I mean, you can use your hands, or you can use a 45-degree pick to help you. Main thing is you don't want to twist them up. If you're wearing gloves, the gloves might get caught up a little bit, but usually that's not a big deal. Okay, I want to make sure that both rings rotate nice and free. Okay, you don't have a situation where any of them are getting snagged. Okay, just lube everything up. No different than anything else, really. Just want to make sure that you protect your sealing rings. And then just carefully work them in. Okay. Very simple. Your intermediate band servo. This is what it looks like. So you're going to have a little horseshoe clip. It's going to go in the groove. And then your spring seat. And then your spring. And then your piston. Okay, this seal also has to be replaced. So when it comes time, I'll replace it before we put it into the case for the final time. Okay, so that's pretty much all the sub-assemblies. I'm ready to go ahead and do the air check for the forward drum. You know, measure clearance, and then we'll put the forward hub back in, and then that will truly be it. Okay, I'll have to pull another selective spacer out of the drawer for the pump. Okay, so to test the forward drum, all you're going to do is introduce air into this port location right here. Okay, what you're hearing is air coming out of the back of the nozzle. It's kind of a cheapy nozzle, but all you're looking for is robust apply, making sure the clutch works as it should when you're putting air in it. Alright, so I can't really measure clearance in the traditional manner like this, so at least not with this thing on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this off, and then I'm just going to measure the distance between the lug and the top of the friction, and then from there I'll measure just the amount of travel that I'm seeing here and add those two together. Okay, so I want this snap ring fully against the top of the lugs here when I'm doing that. Alright, so I'll take this off, we'll measure, and then I'll put it back on. I think I already measured this, something like 35 thousandths, but I want to double check. Okay, all I'm going to do is just let the dial caliper plunger kind of collapse until I hit 0 when this part of it is resting on the lug, and that's basically it. So that's telling me 25 thousandths. So that felt good. I mean, I think when I was doing it on the bench earlier, it was a little bit awkward, so I wasn't exactly sure if my measurements were accurate. So it's part of the reason why I wanted to do it again. So if this gives me 25 thousandths, then we're good. Alright, we have the dial indicator set up on kind of a contraption, so it is stable. So now I'm going to go ahead and just put air in the forward feed, and we'll see what kind of number we get on that indicator. Yeah, it looks like it's about 21 thousandths. 22 thousandths. Okay, I can live with that. So we're a shade under 50 thou. When this thing gets in the vehicle and starts working again, then it'll probably loosen up a little bit and put us right at that 10 thou per friction prescribed clearance.